have a prayer po. Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, would like to praise you this afternoon for giving us this opportunity of learning about the comparative education. Dear Father, as we have this panel discussion, may you please help us to have a strong connection, strong internet connection, dear Father, that I may be able to share them fully what I have understood about our subject. Please forgive us, Lord, for all the sins that we have committed against thee, and continue to give us knowledge from above. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. Okay, so yun nga po, as I have said, this is around 45 minutes, so I will start now. It's a pre-recorded video po. No audio daw kay Sir Ronald. Oh my. Yun nga po yung problem ko. I have unstable connection. So if you cannot hear me clearly, siguro i-message nyo na lang po ako ulit dito so that I'll siguro stop the video and then replay. Hindi daw makinig ni Sir Ronald. Pero yung iba po okay naman, naririnig naman po ako. Oh, okay. Thank you, Sir Ronald. Okay, so yun na po. I'll share my screen now. Shares. Okay. Can you now see po my screen? I will now play it. If you have any problem, you can just chat me po. If you also have questions, you can also ask me later po. So yun na po, I'll play it na po.
Hello, fellow colleagues. Good day to everyone. Welcome to my presentation about comparative education chapter highlights. I hope that you will be able to learn something and that you will be able to utilize this in your own work setting. So let us start. In our comparative education subject, we have tackled around 8 chapters. First chapter is about globalization and education reforms, paradigms or paradigms, and ideologies. Chapter 2 is about globalization's meta-ideological hegemony and paradigm shifts in education. Chapter 3 is about human rights, global education. Chapter 4 is about vision for the new global teacher, reflections from a comparative education perspective. Chapter 5 is about STEM education as a germ, reviewing Australia's STEM discourse. Chapter 6 is about internationalization of higher education in Russia, aiming for global recognition. Chapter 7 is about devolution and public university infrastructure development in Kenya, a post-2000 rights-based development agenda. And lastly, Chapter 8 is about Vygotsky and a global perspective on scaffolding in learning mathematics. So in each chapter, I'll be sharing with you some important topics which I know will be very beneficial for us as teachers or administrators. In Chapter 1, we have to know first what globalization is, then how it impacts education, and how others sees it in their own school setting. Globalization has various definitions. However, in our discussion, I will be sharing the definition from our reference book, which states that globalization as a phenomenon is a multidimensional cultural construct, reflecting the necessary interdependence and connections of all the core facets of culture. So what are these? These are the economy, the politics, ideology, languages, education, consumer goods, travel, modes of communication, technology, and the people around the world. As you can see in the definition, globalization does not just affect education, but all the other areas of life. Nonetheless, in our discussion, our focus would be its impact in education. Very important to take note is this. When globalization sets in, the word competitiveness or global competitiveness becomes attached to it, to a point that it becomes inevitable or unavoidable. Now, how do you see this or this word competition in the education system today around the world? You see, the emerging challenge of today's education and policy reforms is to improve academic achievement. Yes, this is very good. Now, with so many schools all over the world, how will we know if one's education system is improving? Correct. It is through setting a standard. Hence, OECD PISA assessment comes in, and other international assessments like the TEAMS. On the other hand, this action seems unlikable because others see it like this, and I quote, forces of globalization manifesting themselves as a neoliberal and bourgeois hegemony tended to legitimate an exploitative system and have contributed to the ongoing neoliberal globalization of the higher education sector. This is characterized by a relentless drive towards performance, global standards of excellence and quality, globalization of academic assessment, like the OECD PISA, global academic achievement syndrome, global academic elitism, and league tables for the universities. That's according to SAGTA 2014. With this, many nations which have ongoing economic restructuring, together with the current education hegemonies, shaping dominant discourses as to how education policy and curriculum need to be reformed in response to this ubiquitous global monitoring of educational quality and standards. Another thing that I have learned about globalization is that globalization has contributed to a new dimension of socioeconomic stratification. They see globalization as the culprit of the growing invisible socioeconomic divide between the rich and the poor globally. Why? Because again of the inevitable competition. In another statement from the reference book, it says, globalization is perceived by some critics at least to be the totalizing force that is widening the socioeconomic status gap and cultural and economic capital between the rich and the poor, and bringing power, domination, and control by corporate bodies and powerful organizations such as that of OECD. Another thing that I have learned is that globalization redefined education and training as an investment in human capital and human resource development, as it embraces the theory of human capital, which proposes that education consistently emerges as the prime human capital investment, or that education can be a stepping stone and a tool to later on generate good income for the family and the nation in general. Globalization is also guided with the ideology of neoliberalism. Neoliberalism in higher education policy reforms focuses on meeting the needs of the market, technical education and job training, and revenue generation. The neoliberal university, as noted by Saunders and others, emphasizes the role of the faculty not as educators, researchers, or members of a larger community, but as entrepreneurs. That's according to Saunders 2010. Accordingly, the current redefinition of academics into entrepreneurs is widespread and is consistent with neoliberal ideology, as is the commodification, commercialization, and marketization of the fruits of faculty labor. Hence, with all that we have talked about, we can clearly see that the politics of higher education reforms reflect this new emerging paradigm of accountability, globalization, and academic capitalism, performance indicators, and standards-driven policy change. Now that we know what globalization is and how it impacts education, let me share with you a study which shows how other teachers perceive globalization based on their own context. Kayak and Skisi 2018 conducted a study entitled Globalization in Terms of Teachers' Opinion and Metaphorical Perceptions. Based on the title, the purpose of their study is to investigate teachers' opinion and metaphorical perception about globalization. The finding of the study revealed that globalization's effects are big and significant all over the world, even in the area of education. Moreover, the study reached the following conclusions. Number one, teachers perceived the effects of globalization in education as positive. This is in contrast to what we have discussed a while back. Number two, teachers' metaphorical perceptions about globalization. These are summarized as follows. 4 of the teachers perceived globalization as like a village. 4 perceived that globalization is like a market. 3 perceived that globalization is like a whirlpool. 3 perceived globalization as family. 3 perceived globalization as shopping. 2 of the teachers perceived that globalization is like a teapot. 2 of them perceived that globalization is like neighborhood. 2 of the teachers perceive that globalization is like a technology. And the number 3, teachers' reasons for analogy of the metaphors about globalization are grouped as globalization as a unifying of differences concept, globalization as a communication and interaction enhancer concept, and globalization as a damaging concept, and globalization as an indefinite concept. So as I have said a while back, globalization has various definitions. Similarly, in this study, we have seen that globalization can also be perceived differently. How about you? How do you perceive globalization? Now, let us jump to chapter 2. In this chapter, let me just share with you some of the ideologies shaping the education system all over the world, educational paradigms that were developed, and its meta-ideological dimensions. In this part, I will just be enumerating things because I might consume all your time. Just remember this. Every educational institution embraces one or more of these ideologies, which influence their school activities, rules and regulations, and other school functions. Okay, for example, we have neoliberalism. This is hostile to and defines traditions as externalities to the economy. But at the same time, it depends on the persistence of tradition like nation, religion, and family. It has 2 important assumptions. Number 1, that everything could be marketized. And letter B, that human beings are driven by the desire to maximize own utility regardless of time and place. Now, if your school embraces this kind of ideology, as an administrator, what will your school policy be? Well, probably your school would include some good marketing strategies to encourage students to enroll in your institution, just like what we are doing, right? Now, as you can see here, ideologies are used by institutions just like that. Okay, now let me enumerate the early and late modern ideologies. Number 1, we have liberalism, social liberalism, and neoliberalism, the one that I have discussed a while ago. And then number 2, we have conservatism. Number 3, communism, utopian socialism, syndicalism, anarchism, and cooperative socialism. We have number 4, socialism and Keynesianism. Number 5, communitarianism and populism. And number 6, populism. We also have this what we called Muslim ideological orientations. We have number 1, secularism. Number 2, traditionalism. Number 3, modernism. And number 4, fundamentalism or Islamism. As for the educational paradigms, we have the market-oriented paradigm. Number 2, etatist, welfarist-oriented paradigm. Number 3, the communitarian-oriented paradigm. And for the meta-ideological dimensions, we have number 1, materialism or consumption versus post-materialism. Number 2, centralism versus decentralism. Number 3, big state versus small state. Number 4, purposive rationality versus value rationality. Number 5, representative democracy versus direct democracy. Number 6, secularism versus desecularism. Number 7, self-orientation versus other orientation. Number 8, individualism versus collectivism. Number 9, autonomy versus equality. And number 10, universalism versus particularism. Let us move on in chapter 3. In this chapter, I will talk about what a global education is, what a human rights educational approach is in its dimensions, and why is there a need for human rights global education. Okay, so what is global education? According to Global Education Network 2017, global education is an approach to create change in society through an active learning process based on the universal values of tolerance, solidarity, equality, justice, inclusion, cooperation, and nonviolence. It starts with raising awareness of global challenges such as poverty or the inequalities caused by the uneven distribution of resources, environmental degradation, violent conflicts, or human rights. Hence, in school, we need to let our students know of the global challenges because global education is designed to change people's attitudes by them reflecting on their own roles in the world, with a goal to motivate and empower people to become active, responsible global citizens. Next, what is a human rights educational approach? Human rights educational approach, or HRE, is defined as encompassing all education, training, information, awareness raising, and learning activities aimed at promoting universal respect for and observance of all human rights. Broad and open-ended, this definition orients HRE towards the progressive advancement of human rights in practice. It aims to prevent human rights violations and abuses by providing persons with knowledge, skills, and understandings, and developing their attitudes and behaviors to empower them to contribute to the building and promotion of a universal culture of human rights. Furthermore, HRE is understood to have 3 dimensions. That's according to United Nations General Assembly 2011. Education about human which includes providing knowledge and understanding of human rights norms and principles, the values that underpin them, and the mechanism for their protection. Number 2, education through human rights, which includes learning and teaching in a way that respects the rights of both educators and learners. And number 3, education for human rights, which includes empowering persons to enjoy and exercise their rights and to respect and uphold the rights of others. Last question. Why is there a need for human rights global education? This study of Mitoma and Marcos 2020 can give us some answers. Number 1, because society continues to struggle with protecting human rights, particularly for those marginalized based on race, gender, religion, sexual orientation, and other identities. These strains are even magnified by the COVID-19 pandemic. Number 2, teachers have a responsibility to teach about past and current human rights issues. The connections between these past events and society today, particularly in light of the pandemic, makes this responsibility especially urgent. And lastly, because human rights education can transform students into ripples of hope. Moving on to chapter 4. In here, we will talk about what a global teacher is, what is expected of them, and why is there a need for them. With the need to teach global human rights education, having a global teacher is a key. Now, what is a global teacher? Ideally, the global teacher would therefore be a sophisticated and worldly educator with a grasp of knowledge and issues far and wide, not just immediately at home. In line with a global teacher, we have this what we call orbital classroom. The orbital classroom in its ideal envisioned form would be one in which teachers and students interact with counterparts in many different settings far and wide to enrich the learning experiences. Here, the comparative dimension and the global local dialectic offer rich potential for enhanced learning. Moreover, as early as 2012, Richardson conducted a study and explained that the global teacher plays a key role in educating students for the 21st century. As the world economies continue to change, the paradigm of teaching has to change to meet these demands. Therefore, the global teacher has to draw from all possible best practices that will give his or her students the necessary knowledge, skills, and abilities to compete and work in the global economies. Before we move on to the next, first, let us be reminded that a key consideration underlying this initiative of global teacher is the evolving globalization context in the new millennium, hence the word global in the global teacher. Going back, what is expected from a global teacher? From our reference book, here are the answers in its ideal form and optimum scenario, which I believe are feasible. Number 1, global teacher is expected to be able to cater the needs of all levels and forms of education, including primary and secondary level schooling, higher education, non-formal education systems, and cultural associations such as the community, national, and global levels. Number 2, global teacher is expected to be able to teach all content areas and subject fields. And number 3, they are expected to be able to harness the power of ICT and be able to communicate and interact via email, Skype, social media, and other online channels in many different countries across settings and countries worldwide, thereby setting up a comparative global dialectic as a form or platform for global learning and participation. Lastly, why is there a need for global teacher? Number 1, the global teacher or orbital classroom has potential to reduce isolation and insularity for teachers and their students. Teachers can capitalize on participation to address their own school system requirements, content area standards in curriculum, or subject area syllabus requirements, and the specific needs of their students in striving for high or improved performance and for competitive academic achievement without isolation. Number 2, effective operation of the global teacher as envisioned could enhance students' understanding of the interconnectedness of events and issues in history and across contexts and countries worldwide. Number 3, there is a need for the global teacher because of the competencies identified in the dossier or database for the project align well with the contemporary international educational imperatives to upgrade and update education across all fields of study. What are these competencies? These competencies are technical, linguistic, cultural, and pedagogical. And lastly, number 4, the Global Teacher Initiative has the potential to advance many desirable forms of cutting-edge education that is sensitive to context factors, including but not limited to intercultural education and multicultural education, international understanding, recognizing the interconnectedness of people, cultures, and nations in facing critical historical and contemporary challenges, identifying key distinguishing features of a phenomenon, event, issues, or process in a given context as contextually shaped, and recognizing the need for different stakeholder groups and individuals to work together on critical problems. According to Richardson, 2012, generally, excuse me, college students are introduced to global issues from their instructors. Teachers who travel abroad have different experiences and can bring those experiences into the classroom. They can provide first-hand knowledge about the people, the food, the architecture, the language, the landscape, and the culture of a foreign country. These experiences, good and bad, can support or contradict what the author is saying in a textbook. By displaying authentic artifacts from their travels, global teachers can make the global experience become real for students who have not traveled abroad. Authentic artifacts such as foreign currency, pottery, jewelry, clothes, and artwork can validate the importance of global experiences and make an indelible impression on a student. This may inspire the student to learn more about the world he or she lives in and can arouse the curiosity of the learner through touch and sight. Okay, now
I let me stop share po, because I am going to send another link. We only have 1 in 43, 40 minutes, 40 seconds rather, 1 in 40 seconds. So I'll end the meeting and then I'll resend. I'll send another link. Okay po. Okay, thank you so much po. Wait lang po. Okay, as I have promised po, since I have two audiences already, two Ronalds, so let me now present to you the next part. Okay.
we are done with chapter 4. Now let us move on to chapter 5. In here, let me just share with you what I have learned about Australia's implementation of STEM education or STEM project. I have here 9 things. Number 1, sense of urgency. Because as soon as they learn about the STEM in 2012, Australia immediately take actions through delivering position papers, reports, policy proposals, and media to promote STEM. Number 2, transparency. Chief Scientist of Australia has been transparent to the people because he communicates extensively to them in the form of press releases, media interviews, policy releases, and public addresses. Number 3, alignment. It's a good thing that in Australia, they usually align the person they will put in the position as chief scientist to their credentials and experiences. Number 4, patriotism. Australians are very patriotic in a sense that they usually seek help from their own citizen and not from foreigners, especially when it comes to education system of their country. Number 5, another good thing that I love about Australia's STEM project is that they integrate business into science, which I think is very important in order for STEM to apply what they have learned and be able to provide for their own country, which could then be of help in the future generations' needs. Number 6, I also have learned that they value collaboration so much. Indeed, no one is an island. If you want to be successful in an endeavor such as this, one has to collaborate with the experts. Number 7, Australia, through their STEM project, shows that they value their future generations so much through seeking for innovation in order to benefit their future generation. Number 8, they also value education and quality of education. It is manifested through their objectives of not settling below top 10 in the international tests ranking. They are always aiming to at least be part of the top 10, if not rank 1. And number 9, they now harness the power of technology by using it to practice e-leadership. This is evidenced by their constant use of their website, where they constantly update the people of what their plans are and involving the people in their decision with important matters. Compared to Australia, Philippine STEM education is in its embryonic stage, considering the result of this study conducted in the year 2019. Up until that year, the researchers were trying to develop a plan to craft a STEM curriculum for young children. This study conducted by Pawilin and Yuzon 2019 is entitled Planning a Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics Curriculum for Young Children, a collaborative project for pre-service teacher education students. It aims to present the result of a study conducted in one semester undergraduate class on STEM for young children that was offered for second year and third year pre-service teacher education students. The classes were used to train pre-service teacher education students to plan curriculum and instruction for STEM for young children. The results of study revealed that in planning for a curriculum for young children, the following are needed. Number 1, things to consider in developing STEM curriculum. Number 2, criteria for selecting STEM activities. Number 3, content standards for STEM curriculum. Number 4, important skills to be developed. And number 5, criteria for selecting instructional materials. Planning a STEM curriculum for young children can be an alternative program to develop gifted potentials of young Filipino learners. Moreover, looking at Australia's response to the STEM education, we can see that it is very sophisticated in a way, right? On the other hand, in the Philippines, we also tried our best to respond to STEM education, though not that as sophisticated as Australia, but at least we tried. Take this study conducted by Pawilin and Yuzon 2019, for instance. For me, this research indicates two things. Number 1, that they need to expose children as young as they are in STEM education, which is a good initiative. And number 2, that these students do not seem to agree to STEM curriculum for young children, or probably they did not see any STEM curriculum for young children yet, or for young children before here in the Philippines. Hence, they wanted to create one, which shows that Philippines' response to STEM education is not quite saturated yet. Moving on to Chapter 6. Here, I will talk about what internationalization is, indicators of the way universities operationally define how they are internationalizing themselves, and how internationalization was affected by globalization. In this age of globalization, the national tradition of the university is being revamped with the intent that the university is becoming more and more internationalized. Now, what is internationalization? Internationalization then is the response to economic, political, and societal forces that refer to the process of integrating an international, intercultural, or global dimension into the purpose, functions, or delivery of post-secondary education. The methods through which higher education institutions respond to globalization and ultimately how they internationalize themselves depend on the mission and competitive strategies an institution chooses to pursue. For decades, organizations such as NAFSA, Organization of International Educators, have identified a number of indicators of the way universities operationally define how they are internationalizing themselves. This includes the following. We have 7. Number 1, the presidents and CEOs of universities issue statements about how international the university is. Number 2, the universities issue mission statements showing how international the university is. Number 3, universities publicize the number of foreign students and scholars that are located at the institution. Number 4, universities are dedicated to sending students abroad for short-term study. Number 5, universities take pride in the number of students who study a foreign language and in the number of foreign languages that are taught. Number 6, universities attempt to increase the international content of their curricula. And number 7, financial resources are dedicated to internationalizing the university. The internationalization indicators mentioned above are usually accepted throughout the world, but the emphasis differs in various regions. Lastly, let me share with you a study conducted by IDE in 2021 entitled Globalization 4.0's Effects on Internationalization of Higher Education, Technology, Internationalization at Home, and New Hubs. In his study, it discusses the effects of technological developments and effects of changes of the globalization approach in the political and social domains. Let us take a look at the effects of technological developments first. Being required to adopt innovative teaching models to keep pace with the changing world through online teaching channels or cooperation with diverse institutions, higher education fields should develop strategies to accommodate changes in the following. Number 1, effects of social media. The internet has brought people closer, making distances less significant, right? With internet also, we can see various beautiful places and have a glimpse of various top-ranking schools, making us to want to go there and have a vacation or even study abroad. Number 2, changes in student profiles. These changes in the higher education environment led to changes in student demand. Because of the technology that now we have, students expect to get answers from the teachers faster, right? And to get their credentials faster when they ask for it. Moreover, nowadays, students are open to and eager for different experiences more than ever. And at the same time, they consider the ratio of money that they will spend to the quality of education they will receive in return, as well as how long it would take them to get back the money they spent in education. Next, letter B, effects of changes of the globalization approach in the political and social domains. After the year 2000, the process of internationalization was referred to in two forms. Number one, internationalization abroad or cross-border education. And we have internationalization at home or the campus internationalization. Moreover, the process of internationalization abroad involves the mobility of students and academics, institution or cross-border institutional mobility, branch campus or education hubs, and programs or online courses or program mobility. Okay, we are now here in chapter 7. In here, what I will be sharing with you is how the devolution affects Kenya. I have here a matrix showing you the before and after the devolution. Before the devolution, Kenyan state had been conceived as a sovereign republic with a centralized political and administrative national system of governance. Whereas after the devolution, the sovereign power of the people is now exercised at the national level and county level or provincial level. Before the devolution, national development planning has been the responsibility of the central government. However, after the devolution, space for Majimbu or regionalism development strategy was created. Before the devolution, allocation of resources was the prerogative of the central government of nation-state, as well as the expansion in university infrastructure as a response to the clamor for access coming from the populace. Whereas after the devolution, there was an expansion of various schools to university, and this expansion is a response to the political and economic developments of the globalization era. Moreover, after the devolution, the institutionalization of country governments provided a mechanism for the legitimation of rights claims by the ethnic blocs from the regions that had been previously been marginalized by central government. Down to the last chapter, chapter 8. In here, I will be dealing with the definition of scaffolding, the process of how it is being done, and a research-based evidence of its effects in teaching. What is scaffolding? Scaffolding had roots in Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, or ZPD, within his wider socio-cultural theory. Brunner et al. Introduced the term scaffolding to describe 6 actions that an expert other might take to support a learner to bridge their ZPD within an instructional setting. Scaffolding was viewed as a process that provided temporary support to an individual learner. Another definition is that scaffolding is described as a process that enables a child or novice to solve problem, carry out a task, or achieve a goal which would be beyond his unassisted effort. How is scaffolding being done? The authors provided 6 processes that a tutor might do for a tutee. Number 1, recruitment. In recruitment or promoting an interest, this is done through giving students motivation in a form of activity or a question. Number 2, reducing task complexity. Here, you need to think of an easy activity or task, which, once they are finished with it and collate all the outputs, would be equivalent as if they finish one complicated task. In other ways, if you ask a difficult question, you can help the student by giving them several easy questions that, if collated, it would be equivalent to the answer on the difficult question you have previously asked. Number 3, direction maintenance. In here, you have to help them to always focus on the instructions that you have previously given by probably giving them a chronological order instruction or organized instruction. Number 4, highlighting critical features or focusing attention. As a teacher, You have to ensure that students' focus on important details will be sustained, probably by using some graphic organizers or giving them some mnemonics to memorize important details. Number 5, controlling frustration. Students cannot sometimes control their frustration, but as a teacher, you have to try to be more observant so that you would be able to immediately recognize what bothers students the most and help them control it. For instance, during the recitation, you could ask the question, or you could ask the question first, and then give the students enough time to think before asking the students to answer the question. Or try to reduce the complexity of the task, as in the number 2 process. And number 6, demonstrating or modeling. This is very essential in all the subjects that requires performance tasks. It would be very helpful for the students to their tasks once they see how it is being done, like manipulating a compound microscope in science, solving a mathematical problem in mathematics rather, and pronouncing a difficult vocabulary word or performing a poem in English. Now, for the research-based evidences, Al-Rawili et al. 2020 conducted a research entitled Effects of Scaffolding Strategies on Higher Order Thinking Skills in Science Classroom. This research aims to examine the effect of scaffolding strategies on HOTS or higher order thinking skills of middle school science students in the context of Saudi Arabia. To carry out the research aim, quasi-experimental design has been applied based on multiple choice questions comprising 20 questions, all distributed in 4 skills, namely application, analysis, evaluation, and creation. The research then concludes that the effect of scaffolding strategies on the 4 skills was found to be significant. Moreover, the present research can contribute to the enhancement of students' higher order thinking skills, provided that scaffolding strategies are applied in science classes. Another study by Peterson 2020 is about the strategies to scaffold students' inquiry learning in science, shows that teachers use different scaffolding strategies according to the student's level of inquiry understanding, and that scaffolding takes place in short sequences. But the findings also show that the teachers themselves are not aware of such differentiated usage of strategies. Hence, this calls for a both better understanding of teachers' usage of scaffolding strategies and for professional development in being aware of how to use such strategies for best practice with the students. That's all, colleagues. So here are my references. Thank you everyone for joining the discussion. I hope that you have learned a thing or two in my presentation. See you again next time, and may God be with you all.